Welcome inside Uncaged Sports Talk. I'm Dan Steenkamer, filling in this week for Luke Siranka on episode 12 of Uncaged Sports Talk this sports year. Luke, here in Red October, we'll be talking a lot about Red October on this episode. And Luke, well, he needs to rest his voice a little bit, but worry not. He will be back next week. Luke's resting up and producing tonight's episode, and I'm so happy to be filling in for my buddy Luke here. And we'll get into all the great Philly and NFL and NBA sports talk on this episode. How about the Philadelphia Phillies moving to 2-0 for a series lead in the NLCS? The Arizona Diamondbacks, they played with fire. Merrill Kelly with his comments about the Citizens Bank Park crowd. Kelly saying, well, maybe, and I'm paraphrasing here, maybe the crowd can't top the World Baseball Classic crowds that Merrill Kelly played in. Well, I think the Phillies bats and the Citizens Bank Park crowd showed Merrill Kelly what Red October is all about. What a resounding Game 2 win for the Phillies, and that really leads off tonight's show. The Phillies blanked the D-backs 10-0 in Game 2 in the bank. Just a dominant line score for Philadelphia. The Phillies did commit one early error. Trey Turner, a bit of a blip in the field, but beyond that, just complete domination of Arizona. The Phils, again, the 10 runs on 11 hits, and that's just the efficiency of the long ball for the Phillies in October. Kyle Schwarber took Merrill Kelly deep 2 times. So Schwarber reprised his role as the leadoff first pitch home run slugger for the Phillies. And all in all, you could see the wheels come off of this one for the D-backs. The pop fly that the D-backs let fall in the infield, the bystander effect, everybody pointing at the other in a way, expecting to get the baseball. And that just, it was a great symbol of the way the Phillies not only got the physical control of the game with knocking the ball out of the yard, but also the mental aspect of the game Philadelphia was controlling. Also, can't say enough about the job that both Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola did to open up this series. Nola really is turning it on as October progresses, and this is a contract fall, you could say in a way, for Aaron Nola, as his future we're not totally certain of as postseason progresses. But right now, you got to really tip your cap to Knowles because he had a big role to play in Game 2. Now, sure, he had plenty of run support. The Phillies did more than enough with the bats, but Aaron Nola, 6 innings pitched, 3 hits allowed, 7 strikeouts for the Phils on Nola Day, or Nola Night, I should say. Just a completely dominant performance, outshining, really outperforming by a long shot Merrill Kelly, who did allow 4 earned runs and 3 walks in 5 2/3. So at the end, the Phillies starting to make you feel it, right? I mean, this is coming to a point where the NLCS is in full control of the Phillies, needless to say. And now as the series shifts to Arizona, the Phillies looking to just keep their foot on the gas pedal. This has such different vibes, I want to say, than last October. And not to say that in a bad way, because, of course, we're still dancing on our own. As you heard in the show's intro, the song is still blaring. The vibes are still high. The daycare is still doing its shenanigans post-game after wins. Love to see it on national TV. But in reality, this is starting to have the feel of a different kind of October than the one the Phillies enjoyed last fall. At least they enjoyed it until falling, of course, to the Astros in the World Series in such devastating fashion. I had somebody describe it to me this way today, and I really thought it was, a smart way of putting it is, last fall felt like a magic carpet ride, through Red October. It was the underdog story. And sure, the same locker room song is playing, the same underdog song is playing, but the way the Phillies are playing is just that much more dominant. And the Phillies appear to be the ones in control, at least through the National League playoff picture. Now, the NLCS is not decided yet, but the energy around this team is still high, just as high in home games, if not more, this October. But the energy and the way the Phillies are winning is really the best way to put it, is so convincing that it's given fans a lot of reason to, have visions, not only return to the World Series, but don't want to speak too soon, but certainly certain fans are having visions of getting it done at this time around. Now, to get it done, the Phillies will have to not only finish off the D-backs, but the American League Championship Series is looking like a heck of a series as well. The ALCS, a couple Titans in Texas battling it out. How about the Houston Astros and the Texas Rangers? When you look at this evening's scores, we're recording this late on Wednesday night. The score in progress for the ALCS Game 3, that series shifting to Arlington, and the Astros currently leading the Rangers in the bottom of the ninth, 8-5. So if you're hearing it, by the time you're hearing this, you'll have the outcome of that game. But at least as it stands now, at press time, as we would say in the newspaper business, at press time, it looks like the Rangers are going to fall in their first home game in this ALCS, and that would make it a 2-1 Ranger lead in the series. Now, from the Phillies' perspective, the Phillies would get home field against the Astros in the World Series, but would have to be the visiting team in the series if the Rangers take the AL pennant. But in the end, the Phillies have shown throughout really these two postseason runs this year and last year, the ability to steal a game on the road early in a series, even in last year's World Series against these Houston Astros. So I don't know that it's worth a ton of sleep being lost. And again, that's all at the risk of looking past Arizona. But the Phillies, as Luke put it in a group chat, that I'm in, and Luke said it best, I think, last night, game 2, or last time out, I should say, was a chance for the Phillies to prove or show that the Diamondbacks really don't belong at this point in this postseason. And that's not to take anything away from the D-backs and the run they put together, because in some ways, this underdog story of Arizona is reminiscent of the way Philadelphia was able to get hot in October last season. But the bats haven't shown up as well for Arizona, certainly in NLCS, and that's a credit to, again, the starting and relief pitching for the Phillies. And Arizona does not have a Bryce Harper. Arizona does not have a Nick Castellanos and Kyle Schwarber, who are absolutely losing it with the power they're showing at the plate. And Trey Turner popping loose homers as well. JT Realmuto's left the yard. Bryson Stott, who can forget his grand slam as the wild card series concluded against the Marlins. This Phillies team is absolutely threatening in the lineup from top to bottom. Even Johan Rojas, not known for his bat, he's out there making plays in the field on gappers hit by Ronald Acuna. So this team is all hands on deck. That much is obvious to anybody who's watching an inning of Phillies postseason baseball, and it is quite exciting for the fans in Philadelphia to see. And we will find out soon enough if the Phillies are able to finish this NLCS sooner rather than later. We have the resumption of the NLCS later this week. Again, it's at Chase Field. Just looking at some ticket prices for Arizona's games at home in the NLCS by curiosity, and it was just, man, I mean, I shouldn't be that surprised, but the disparity as far as what the prices show up as on the resale market due to the demand at different places, it's really something. I mean, Philadelphia truly is, it's a bit of a shame in some ways, right? But to have the ticket prices be that high in Philly, but look, it's a reflection of that many people in the city want to be a part of this and want to experience this and want to get behind this team and be loud and have that effect on every single postseason game in South Philly. So the way I see it, the Phillies, it's going to ask a lot of them in order to keep up this level of dominance, but a sweep is certainly not out of the question. And you just have to think at the end of the day, the World Series, I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to put myself on the record on this podcast, beginning to think about those possibilities of the World Series. If the Phillies do wind up playing the Rangers in the World Series, that would occur during the Eagles-Cowboys game week over the NFL. That would make for an absolutely historic week between Dallas and Philadelphia. And I can only think that would make the intensity that much higher. The crowd at Citizens Bank for possible World Series set of home games that much louder for the Phils. And of course, you got to remember Globe Life Field, where the Rangers play, right next to AT&T Stadium, the home of the Dallas Cowboys. So that is absolutely going to be a situation where those two fan bases, the overlapping of the Phillies, the Eagles fans, the overlapping of the Rangers, Cowboys fans, it would just absolutely be a sight to behold. But again, maybe that's a step too far. Just putting that out there on folks' radars as we consider the possibilities of the Phillies potentially taking home a second straight NL pennant. Now, moving things across the way in the sports world, Red October, baseball's had our attention, but as we get later in October, we get that much closer to tip-off of the NBA season. Now, the NBA tip-off really is right around the corner. It may be sneaking up on some folks, and certainly for Philadelphia fans, maybe it's been a headache to start the preseason with the James Harden reports and rumors from practice and preseason camp, Harden's presence, how much he's practicing, questions about how Joel Embiid is reacting to all of the situation unfolding with James. It is just really a draining thing, I think, for Sixers fans to have to endure as the season begins. But looking at the overall NBA landscape, it's going to be the schedule makers. You have to tip your cap to them. Once the preseason wraps up, now we have preseason games happening through Friday the 20th of this week. But once the preseason wraps up, we have Tuesday, October 24th, the first pair of NBA regular season games. And boy, they will be doozies. The Los Angeles Lakers at the defending champion Denver Nuggets for a 7:30 Eastern tip on TNT. You have to start with the Nuggets, right? And the fact that the Nuggets have Nikola Jokic coming back off a championship, off a title. Denver is going to be ecstatic, that home crowd, to see the team get its rings. And LA, of course, how about LeBron kicking it back for another season, running it back? And I have to think the Lakers, of course, are going to be a subject of a lot of scrutiny. This is a team that when you look at the depth chart, LeBron James, I mentioned his name, he's running it back. Austin Reeves, Jared Vanderbilt in the projected starting five, Anthony Davis. Really paying attention to Anthony Davis on opening night, because it's that one time where, at least as it stands right now, we're seeing AD with no injury designation, right? And I really do want to get as much video as I can and seeing this Lakers team when it looks as close to full strength as possible. But in the end, you have to think the Nuggets should be favored in this one. The Denver Nuggets, all the momentum and all the celebration of the title that much shouldn't be something that weighs them down and distracts them as much as it propels them looking to get off to the right foot in 2023-24. Now, the nightcap in the opening night doubleheader for the NBA, it'll be the Phoenix Suns at the Golden State Warriors. Very interested in this game, probably even more so than the first game, because the Phoenix Suns, the talk of the offseason in many ways, right? You look at the Suns, Bradley Beal making that debut at the point guard spot for Phoenix. So you got Beal to go with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. That's as big a big three as you'll see out in the West. Now, the West had a bunch of talented teams, but the Phoenix Suns, I'm very, very interested in seeing how they look to start with Bradley Beal in the picture. And who are the Suns playing? Well, I just said the Golden State Warriors. And when you take a peek at the Warriors, you have to recall on that depth chart for Golden State, it's a familiar name for the Suns. As you take a look, you see Chris Paul at the point guard spot for the Warriors. So that matchup, or I should say a rematch with Paul against his former teammates. Chris Paul, such a vet, to be able to run the Warriors offense. Very interested in seeing how Chris Paul pairs with the Splash Brothers, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, of course, Draymond Green back with the Warriors as well. It's a team that, so long as, similar to the Lakers, as long as the Warriors stay healthy, they should have a season where they kind of reassert themselves, I think, as not necessarily the Kings of the West, because the West is so deep and so tough to project, but certainly the Warriors expect to be in there. Not a hot take. You expect the Warriors to be in there by the middle of the season and certainly by season's end. But those are only the first two games of the NBA schedule, and that's just with the party starting. Again, that's on Tuesday, October the 24th, just under a week from tonight as we record again on Wednesday, October the 18th. That's just the beginning of the NBA slate. Certainly, Philadelphia listeners more, or I should say, most interested in the following games, which will include Philadelphia. The Sixers will get going once the calendar turns to October the 26th. The Sixers at the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, the Bucks in the East, the story of the NBA, probably not just the Eastern Conference, but the Milwaukee Bucks adding Damian Lillard by trade this offseason. All the talk being about the Miami Heat, that's the reported destination that Dame and his camp preferred. And instead, the Blazers, credit to the Portland Trailblazers, they hold their ground in the sense that, yes, they would like to make Damian Lillard happy. But the baseline way of doing that, of course, was to get him to a contender. And the Milwaukee Bucks, you have to say, they're a contender. And as a matter of fact, they're that much more of a threat than the Miami Heat. And to pair Damian Lillard with Giannis Antetokounmpo, that is just an inside-out combination that's going to be absolutely lethal. And it's a great fit, and it clicks for so many reasons. Think about Dame. He's so clutch, and his offense is out of this world. The defense, not the same, skill set. So Giannis, though, you have no concerns about his defense in the paint and his defense. And Giannis' scoring is just all over the floor. So Dame and Giannis are going to work out as a great pair, and it already adds up to a starting lineup that is really strong. You have Malik Beasley at the projected starting guard spot, that shooting guard area. Pat Connaughton is going to be a great second piece at shooting guard. Chris Middleton at the forward spot. The Bucks are going to be a headache for everybody in the East, including the Sixers. And that's not to mention, when you look at the broader Eastern Conference, the Boston Celtics improved themselves as well, which is certainly, from Philadelphia's perspective, if you're a Philly listener, painful to say, but the Celtics really upped their game, I think, in the offseason as well. They land Drew Holiday. So we'll talk about point guards moving places. Dame with the Bucks. Think about Chris Paul with the Warriors, Bradley Beal in Phoenix, and Drew Holiday landing with Boston with all the mixing and matching in this offseason. Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Kristaps Porzingis. Really, you got a lot of all-star caliber starting lineup there for the Boston Celtics, and it's a matchup. Think about the Sixers. That's a matchup that's been such a headache over the years. Not telling anybody anything they didn't already know there, but that gives you an idea of really certain teams and headlines to watch out for in this NBA season. It's just getting started. Some folks might be looking to tune in more so closer to the Christmas Day tip-off. That slate of games was always a great one, all-day basketball, and it'll be here before we know it. But opening night should also be an amazing set of basketball to start us off, and that's really concentrated out west. Once you get day 2 and day 3 of the regular season in the NBA, those Eastern Conference teams who I think match up quite well with certain heavyweights in the West, the Bucks, the Celtics, they might be the best teams in all of basketball, and they'll really set the tone, I think, in the Eastern Conference. Can't overlook them one bit. But of course, as we started off the segment, the Denver Nuggets, the defending champs, have to give a lot of credit to them, and have to also, of course, some more 76ers talk. How will Joel Embiid and the Sixers perform with James Harden looming over the entirety of the situation in Philadelphia? You have to feel for Sixers fans, because in the end, this is starting to feel more and more like the disgruntled Ben Simmons situation by the end of it. James Harden's done this before to other teams, and now the Sixers feeling a bit burnt. Now, to give certain certain credit to Harden's point of view. Now, it's gotten to be escalated a bit over the course of the offseason as we get closer to the season, but Harden has certain points to make about what assurances he thought he had from GM Daryl Morey, as it relates to a longer-term extension. But if Harden wants to be the top paid and wants to be the number one, if that were the case, that's certainly, there isn't a pathway to that with Joel Embiid in place in Philadelphia, with the Sixers looking to appease and make the most of Joel Embiid's prime as a Sixer. So with that, a lot of rambling about the NBA. It's just the beginning, just breaking in that NBA talk this winter. I mean, we're not quite in the winter yet, but it's cooling off, and it's going to feel like winter when we see pro basketball being played on the hardwood. Now we're going to take a bit of an exhale here. We will switch things over to NFL talk. You'll stick with us for, a lot to react to. An Eagles loss for the first time this season. All kinds of storylines to look at as we enter this weekend in the NFL. But first, I got to let you know to check out an official sponsor of Uncaged Sports Talk. Let you know to head over to Dan the Man Stanley at Sheridan Nissan, where they will hook you up with a new car. All you got to do is let them know that Uncaged Sports Talk sent you. So as you know, if you're a longtime listener, Dan the Man Stanley, he's got you covered. Just let him know that Uncaged Sports Talk let you know to head over to Sheridan Nissan. Now, with that, we switch gears to NFL talk, to Eagles talk. The Eagles, a headline in the NFL for the wrong reasons most recently, as the Birds fell for the first time this season. And it was a tough one to the New York Jets. A bit of a trap game in some ways. You could call it that in East Rutherford. The Eagles unable to come up with the dub as the Jets were lurking, lying in the weeds in the second half, holding Philadelphia scoreless in the second half, and the Jets able to pull it out late with a 20-14 W. Now, some folks had been speculating and prognosticating this was a situation that could arise for the Eagles at some point this season. We haven't seen this Birds team necessarily look as thoroughly dominant as it did, of course, down the stretch last season in the run to the Super Bowl. This year, winning close ones, winning tight ones prior to this Jets game. The Eagles were playing close games, coming out 5-0 though, right? So you can't necessarily fault that. But some of those warts that maybe had been creeping up, some inconsistency in the offense's performance, that shows up with the Birds getting shut out in the second half by the Jets. Now, to me, especially disconcerting, you have it occur when the Jets were missing Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed in that secondary. So you see that and you think, hey, maybe the Eagles can throw on these guys. You have Jalen Hurts maybe getting a get-right game on his hands. It's a great defense overall for the Jets, but maybe that matchup in particular, right? Looking to attack the secondary, not the case. Jalen Hurts throws 3 interceptions and was 28 of 45 passing with 1 touchdown. So the fact that the Eagles with the lead at halftime wound up having to have Jalen Hurts throw 45 times total, even that alarms me. When you take a look at the box score and you say, oh, how does that happen? How did the Eagles wind up asking Jalen Hurts to throw closer to 50 times in a game than Zach Wilson had to throw? Zach Wilson throws 33 times in the win. Hurts had a lot asked of him. Well, the Eagles rushing game, not doing a ton. I mean, you look at the running backs for the Eagles, they were trailing Jalen Hurts in net yards by a fair bit. I mean, Hurts wraps up with the 47 yards rushing on 8 carries, but DeAndre Swift averages just under 2 yards a carry. Kenneth Gainwell had a couple carries, and Boston Scott had as well, but DeAndre Swift, in the end, 18 yards total on the ground on those 10 carries that he had on the afternoon. So that's not a result that you're looking for the Eagles in the game. You have a lead as a favorite on the road, really not able to establish that ground game and really grind out more clock. Now, talked about Jalen Hurts having to throw the ball a lot. Sure, that was to the effect of A.J. Brown having a good game, as Brown, to his credit, had 7 receptions for 131 yards on 9 targets, so an efficient day. A lot of long gains for A.J. Brown as he averaged just under 20 yards per reception, but Eagles not able to break those big scoring plays in the second half. The Jets hang around, and give credit to Zach Wilson. He has increasingly steered this Jets team to be competitive and to steal some wins along the way following Aaron Rodgers' infamous Week 1 injury. Just to, again, acknowledge the fact that the Jets have been performing. They take advantage of a winnable matchup at the Broncos in the week prior to the Eagles game, and so the Jets have that proof of themselves that they can hang in there and compete in the NFL. Now, the Broncos, I'll get to them a little bit later in this NFL segment, but it is the Denver Broncos, and it is a team that is certainly being poorly coached and has dysfunction, but to win at Denver, the Jets got that done by 10 points on the road the prior week. Even the week before that Broncos game, the Jets had threatened the Chiefs and nearly gotten a win over the Kansas City Chiefs. The Jets are able to put it together against the Eagles at home. So while the Eagles certainly don't love the sting of losing as a big favorite against the Jets, the situation where at some point, if you're playing with fire this long in the NFL, if you're playing in close games long enough, and if you play a team that's really starting to figure it out over the course of time, like the Jets are, this kind of thing can sneak up on you. But the personnel for the Jets weren't all there. And so that's where it becomes that much more of a question mark for Eagles fans, certainly. The Eagles now have a chance to get right, though, this weekend. Sunday Night Football, NBC in town. that Philadelphia crowd, I think it's going to have some Red October type energy to use the baseball crowd terminology, because it is going to be a heck of an atmosphere that welcomes in, or maybe I should say isn't so welcoming too, Tua Tagovailoa and the Miami Dolphins. What a marquee game for the Eagles as they look to get it done against a high-powered Miami offense. And ESPN Analytics, they're favoring Miami in this one, 58.5% win probability being assigned to the Dolphins. And sure, Tua's healthy at the moment. Tyreek Hill, one of the many weapons for the Dolphins. Jalen Waddle, another weapon outside. You know all the names for the Dolphins. And you look at Mike McDaniel, he's been pushing all the right buttons for the Dolphins. But at the same time, the Dolphins are not invincible. They did fall by 4 touchdowns on the road to a strong Bills team. You have to think this game for the Dolphins is the toughest one they've had since they were blown out by Buffalo on the road. And the Dolphins, once again, playing on the road in Philadelphia. So not an unbeatable team whatsoever. Both teams entering at 5-1. Has all the makings of a great game. Certainly, you won't want to miss it. But I do like the Eagles in this one. And I'll get into it more and specify it more as we delve into our next portion of the show, which will be a bit more NFL talk by way of my NFL power rankings. It's going to be the Dan 10 this week, as Luke has dubbed it. Appreciate Luke personalizing my Dan 10 here. Luke's list also presented here on screen. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see Luke's list and the changes from last week. Who's trending up, who's trending down. Just to go through Luke's list first, because you want to know what's up and what's down for Luke. Luke has the Miami Dolphins at number 1 this week, up 3 spots from their prior position. The 49ers at number 2 for Luke. The Lions, the Detroit Lions, up 2 spots at number 3. Lions have a big game on tap this week that we'll discuss a little bit in a moment. At Luke's number 4 is the Kansas City Chiefs, slipping down 1 spot. Also slipping in the rankings, the Philadelphia Eagles. For reasons we just described a bit ago, Luke's list has the Eagles at number 5 this week. Right behind the Eagles, of course, the NFC East division rival Cowboys, the number 6 spot. Also down are the Jaguars and Bills, taking the 7 and 8 spots respectively. So it's Jacksonville and Buffalo for an AFC pair at 7 and 8. The Ravens, speaking of the AFC, the Baltimore Ravens are up 3 into the top 10 and at number 9 in Luke's list. And the Cleveland Browns going up 5 spots, number 10, to join Luke's list this week. So the AFC North getting in on Luke's list with Ravens and Browns at 9 and 10. Trending up overall, when you look at the greater picture beyond top 10, the Washington Commanders leaping 10 spots in Luke's list. Big move upward for the Washington Commanders. They've certainly, I think, acquitted themselves this season thus far overall. Sam Howell showing those flashes. And also, when you say the Commanders, you think of one of their games earlier this season against the Chicago Bears. The Bears are the team that's trending down in Luke's list. The Bears dropping 7 spots all the way to last in Luke's list. Number 32 out of 32 are the Chicago Bears. Now, when you look at the Dan 10, my top 10, let's see how it stacks up to Luke's list. Looking like, in general, the same combination of teams in the top 10, but I have the order a bit different. Let me stick with the 49ers at number 1. The San Francisco 49ers, I know they fell at the Browns in the early window on the road in Cleveland in that weather with the injuries. They're all my excuses for the San Francisco 49ers. Yes, Brock Purdy struggled to even grip the football in those conditions. Would have liked to see Purdy handle that a bit better. But at the same time, the 49ers were down Christian McCaffrey, down a top weapon on the outside as well. And in the end, I think we all respect the Cleveland Browns defense. We've seen what the Browns have done on defense this season. And the Browns hanging in there as a competitive team. Luke has the Browns at number 10 on his list. I'll get to the Browns in a little bit on my list. But I think the Cleveland Browns this season worthy of our respect. And so I'm not going to dock the 49ers too much for a road loss in that early window, travel cross country. Maybe I'm being a bit too forgiving, but Luke has the 49ers at number 2. I'll stick with the San Fran at number 1. Now, at my number 2 is the Kansas City Chiefs. This one was difficult for me because the Chiefs have not necessarily won with as many style points this season. We have, of course, high expectations for the Chiefs. And when you look at the Chiefs this season, it hasn't exactly been runaway wins lately. A 3-point win against the Jets that we referenced earlier, a 7-point win over the Vikings. Both of those games were wins on the road for the Chiefs. And then recently the Chiefs coming home and beating the Broncos 19-8. So only 19 points scored against an inferior team in the Denver Broncos, against one of the worst defenses that we've seen in the Denver Broncos. But I still think the Chiefs, as Patrick Mahomes continues to cope with what isn't a great wide receiver core, and as he continues to enjoy Travis Kelce's presence, so long as Kelce is healthy, it's hard for me to really doubt the Chiefs. The Chiefs coming weeks, the Chargers and Broncos, key divisional games. Chargers should be a better game than Denver, of course, but I have to think my prediction will be those will be 2 wins in a row for the Chiefs before we get into a really bit of a doozy part of the schedule. Dolphins and Eagles games back-to-back in KC for Kansas City. But you should mention there's a bye in that picture. It'll be the Dolphins and Eagles in a consecutive games. And I should correct myself. The Dolphins game will be played internationally for KC. So they get that bye coming back from the Miami game, and it'll be the Eagles playing at KC on November 20th. That'll be a Monday night game. So looking down the road for the Chiefs, I'll have a little bit of a better idea of whether they're really going to earn this number 2 spot in my power rankings. But so with those prove it games coming, right? With those games where you can really see, are the Chiefs that kind of team once again? Are they going to continue hanging in there as the NFL's elite? Certainly expect that with Patrick Mahomes. We're going to get to see it on full display in due time. But in the meantime, have to give a lot of edge to the Chiefs here over the Eagles at number 3. I keep the Eagles in my top 3. Luke actually had the Eagles at number 5. I'm going to keep the Eagles at 3. Jalen Hurts, he's going to turn it on by the time we get to Thanksgiving. He just will. Jalen Hurts is going to find the week-to-week groove. There's a lot of scrutiny on the offense overall, and it'll start with Jalen Hurts. But the running game as well left him a lot to be desired in the loss that the Eagles had to the Jets, as we described. So I'm not going to, again, penalize the Eagles too much, also being pretty forgiving to them, similarly to how I was with the 49ers. But I'm going to roll with the Eagles at my number 3 spot. Miami Dolphins are at number 4 for me, and this is a bit harsh, right? But I'm going to say, okay, the Dolphins, yes, they're my top 5, but they are a notch behind the Eagles. Why? I'm going to not necessarily view the Dolphins as a team that I think, and I want to spoil my picks for later, but I'm not necessarily viewing the Dolphins as a team that can go on the road in primetime and win a crowd in Philly like that. I mean, that's going to be an absolutely monumental task for the Dolphins. Sure, you have to think the Dolphins offense is going to travel well, but can the defense give the Miami offense enough time to get going? I really do think the Eagles are going to have something to prove, and they're going to have something to say about coming off of a loss. The Eagles, I'm expecting a hot start from them. Can the Miami defense give the Miami offense enough time to really start to get going early, get the momentum, and quiet that loud primetime crowd? Because that's what I'm looking for early on. And I know Miami's been on a surge. Since that loss to Buffalo, yes, wins over the Giants and Panthers, but wins over New York and Carolina, that's not moving the needle a ton for me, right? At this point in the season, those are games we're certainly expecting Miami to get done. Can't penalize them for who they have on their schedule. But, overall, the Dolphins have wins over the Patriots, the Broncos, the Panthers, and the Giants this season. Yes, there are quality wins against the LA Chargers, and the Buffalo Bills was a loss that wasn't so hot. So, yes, there are more quality opponents on the schedule. But this is the real barometer for the Miami Dolphins. I mean, if we're going to talk about Miami as a possible AFC Super Bowl rep, as a possible AFC champ, this is where it comes down, right? Like, this is where you want to see how Tua can hang in there in a game where he's going to be under pressure. He's going to have the noise to work in, and he's going to have one of the best front sevens in the NFL bearing down on him. And again, having an acknowledgement of Tua's injury history, not looking to slight him for it in a particular way, certainly feel bad for him in the severity of what he's gone through, but just a lot that comes to my mind here for the Dolphins. Will the Dolphins be the Dolphins team that regresses, in that kind of spot, or will it be a Dolphins team that really ascends and makes a statement on Sunday Night Football? Until they show it to me, I'm going to put the Dolphins right behind the Eagles in my top 4 as part of the day and 10. The Detroit Lions and the Baltimore Ravens are my 5 and 6 spots in the day and 10. So you're seeing a theme here. We have the Lions and Ravens playing each other as well this week, and what I think is certainly the second best game on the slate, arguably the best game of all, because the Lions are a team that continues to be that much more popular as a look for one of the best in the NFC. And how could you blame the Lions? I mean, going into this last week of NFL games, I really thought the Lions were in a spot where they could fall. They could possibly falter as a road favorite at the Buccaneers. That was not the case. The Lions disposed of the Buccaneers 20-6, convincing win. The Detroit Lions getting it done in great fashion. Jared Goff, 2 touchdown passes, which go with 353 yards, 30 of 44 passing. So Goff really had a good day when he had a situation where, for the Lions offense, David Montgomery wound up not being able to finish the game. He only had 6 carries on the day for 14 yards. Craig Reynolds had to pick up the slack for the Detroit rushing game to the tune of 15 yards on 10 carries for Mr. Craig Reynolds. So it was a Detroit game that really wound up being Jared Goff. Look at the way he played. Look at the way he found Amon-Ra St. Brown. 12 catches for St. Brown with 124 yards total and a touchdown. Jameson Williams also got involved with a touchdown. That's a positive sign for the Detroit offense. There's no doubt about that. Sam Laporta at the tight end spot seems to be a really trendy young player. 4 catches, 36 yards for Laporta. The list goes on. And that's not to mention anything about the Lions defense, which held Tampa Bay, which looks like a better offense than we thought. The Lions held the Bucs to three points in both the second and third quarters. So just 2 field goals on the day for Tampa Bay. That's how the Bucs added up to those 6 points. So Detroit Lions, a lot of reasons to be impressed with them. And so I had the Lions into my top 5. Right behind the Lions are the Baltimore Ravens, and the Ravens just nipping at the heels of the Lions here. So we'll see how it shakes out at M&T Bank Stadium this week. But watching as much of the Ravens as I do, I have to dock the Ravens for the fact that the offense overall, the scheme, the system is really clicking for Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson is showing his prowess as a passer, but his receivers are failing him. I mean, certain days, especially against Pittsburgh not long ago in the Steel City, the Ravens receivers were absolutely sabotaging Lamar Jackson's highly graded PFF performance. I mean, Jackson's having a great year in many's eyes, but goodness gracious, the Ravens receivers. I mean, yes, Odell Beckham Jr., he's not going to be the guy who's going to be absolutely carrying a whole receiver room. And at a bare minimum, you just want Odell to be able to be healthy and as close to physically himself as possible. But beyond Zay Flowers, who himself has had his own struggles with drops, I mean, Nelson Aguilar, he gets open, but is he going to have reliable hands? Is Rashad Bateman going to have reliable hands? I just don't know about this Ravens offense, and I don't know about the way the Ravens converted in the red zone or lack thereof against the Tennessee Titans in the Ravens win in London. So again, give the Ravens credit for their record. I mean, it's the Ravens team that is 4-2 heading into this week's big game against Detroit. But you don't love to see a close loss to the Colts in an upset fashion, and the Steelers also upsetting the Ravens in a game that usually is close to the rivalry. But so sure, am I asking the Ravens to be perfect? Yeah, I am. But that's the case because you've had a favorable matchup against the Texans before C.J. Stroud got going. That was week 1. The Ravens win that one. They beat the Bengals, also a favorable matchup when the Bengals didn't have their healthy Burrow, and the Bengals hadn't shaken off those issues, those preseason cobwebs. You get a Browns game where Deshaun Watson's not available, and you're able to really eat up on Dorian Thompson-Robinson in that ball game, a 28-3 Baltimore win. I say this not to detract from the Ravens too much because the record is the record, and those are wins, but this weekend, very similarly to the Dolphins, the Ravens, I want to see it proven at home at M&T. Protect the bank in that 1 o'clock window. Should be just as loud because, again, it's a marquee game, NFC, AFC crossover. It'll just be one of the great games to watch in the week between the number 5 and 6 teams in my top list. Now, at number 7 for me, it's the Buffalo Bills, followed by number 8, the AFC companion, Cleveland Browns. So the Bills this season, certainly, of course, maybe were the most pressurized, had the most pressure of any NFL team coming into the year. The Buffalo Bills, the noise of Stephon Diggs and his level of content with the situation in Buffalo. Josh Allen, we all know what he's capable of, but you still are waiting to see Josh Allen in the Super Bowl. And the Bills this season, they started out with that loss to the Jets that really came in the inexplicable fashion it did late in the game, despite the fact that Aaron Rodgers did not play the vast majority of that game, or really did not have a chance to participate whatsoever when you get down to the basics of it. The Bills recover from that season opening loss in pretty good fashion against the Raiders and Commanders, back-to-back wins there. Again, strength of schedule there, not going to bowl you over. The biggest feather in the Bills cap, and so Bills fans will be upset. Hey, we're behind the Dolphins, despite beating the Dolphins by 4 touchdowns, 28-point margin, 48-20 over Miami in a few games ago. Yes, I understand that's the qualm, but to eke out a win over the Giants most recently and to fall to the Jaguars in London, just overall for this high expectations of a Bills team, I'm not quite ready to give them the spot of the Dolphins overall body of work when you consider the fact that the Dolphins, that offense is so much more explosive and flashy right now. And it's just hard to ignore that when it comes to the Dolphins. And you look at Luke's list, and he's with me. He is the Dolphins at number 1, and the Bills all the way down at number 8. So although the head-to-head is there for Buffalo, of course, that's a big division win for the Bills. Got to give them credit for the way they won, and that could easily be a playoff preview. And so the Bills able to win by that kind of score, for the Bills to score 14 points in the first quarter, 17 points in the second quarter, that was Josh Allen's big day, 4 touchdowns in total. I mean, with a rushing score for Josh Allen. Yes, I'm not ignoring any of that, and I've just acknowledged all of it in absolute word spew. But on the overall picture, I got to give the nod to the Dolphins, a few spots ahead of the Buffalo Bills, and the Bills reside at 7. Now, the Browns at number 8, got to have the Browns in the top 8 of this picture. Now, I know Luke has them at number 10, but who has beaten the 49ers this season other than the Cleveland Browns? Like, got to give the Browns a lot of love on that one. The Cleveland Browns this season really are putting together a pretty good manage at the start of the year with Deshaun Watson out currently. W over the Niners, I keep saying. It was a great way to recover after a really bad loss to the Ravens without Watson as well. We touched on that. But competitive loss to the Steelers a couple weeks prior, 26-22, 1-possession divisional game. Not going to dock you a ton for that. And the Browns defense really set the tone with the way they smothered the Bengals in week 1. 24-3 Browns win. I know the Bengals certainly weren't firing on all their cylinders as we touched on, but my goodness, for Cincinnati to be handled the way it was by that Browns defense. And it's talent across the board in this Browns defense. And it was showing again when the Browns beat the Titans in week 3, 27-3, final score at Cleveland over Tennessee. This defensive depth chart showing why it has those pieces who are playing to their potential. Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith, names you'll know in the front line. Grant Delpit, Denzel Ward, members of that DB room. These are players who can put together a kind of playoff caliber defense, but I don't love the instability at quarterback. Even when Watson's healthy, he's not the same player in my eyes as he was in that pre-controversy, pre-legal issues, pre all kinds of clouds hanging over Watson that he created, pre everything Deshaun in Houston. It's not the same player. So give the Browns the number 8 spot. Also in the AFC North, the Cincinnati Bengals at 9 for me. This is a bit of a projection for me. The Bengals just starting to turn the corner, perhaps, and it was just trying to round out your top 10. You're trying to see who's most deserving. On the body of work, the Bengals have looked really ugly at times this season. So this is one that people may push back on. But lately, the Bengals starting to come around at manageable games against NFC West opponents. They get it done, defeating Arizona 34-20 in the desert. It's a Cardinals team that's better than people thought. And so for the Bengals to be able to overcome and bounce back from a massive loss to the Titans in their prior game, I like the fact that the Bengals were able to take down the Cardinals by multiple possessions. And then the Bengals were able to defend home turf against the Seahawks most recently, a 17-13 Bengals win. So I think that the Bengals, sure, will they get knocked down a peg with a loss likely coming to the San Francisco 49ers later this month? Yes, I could see that. But the Bengals seem to be maybe starting to show us a little more of what they're truly made of. And if beyond the 49ers game, it's just another test against Buffalo in the following game. So could the Bengals prove me wrong, and could the Bengals disappoint me and really play their way out of the top 10? Sure, they could. But having that caveat, you're probably already tired of hearing me say those kind of caveats. Having that, I do think that I'm going to trust Joe Burrow to be, when he gets past the early season, you really start to see Joe Burrow put together as you get deeper, maybe closer to Halloween or past Halloween or that much closer to the Thanksgiving break. That's where Joe Burrow is going to start to really, really turn it up, is what his history has been as he shakes off preseason injuries that kind of nagged for him over the years. So that's kind of where I stand on the Bengals. And when it comes to number 10, give me the Dallas Cowboys. Now, the Cowboys, it's going to be a polarizing pick for all listeners, I have to think. But the boys, yes, it was not a close one in the most marquee game that we can recall on the schedule. Dallas at San Fran, the 49ers rolled all over them, 42-10. So, yes, are the Cowboys in the 49ers class? No. But does that mean, and they're probably not even in the Eagles class, right? Now, folks will say they match up with the Eagles better, and they likely do. But if that's the case, even if you want to say that the Cowboys are a peg below those teams, and I'd have to say they are because of, in part, the Dak Prescott being the quarterback, the Cowboys can still be at the end of the top 10 in the NFL. Like, to me, that's not an issue whatsoever. The Cowboys really did need badly to pull out that win at the LA Chargers on Monday night. The Cowboys got that done. 3-point win on the road against a quality quarterback. Maybe not a quality coach with Brandon Staley, but a quality quarterback in Justin Herbert. And so the Cowboys, their overall strength of schedule, the strength of their wins, not so great, right? Giants W, Jets W. And this is me saying the Cowboys won those games over New York, both New York teams to start the season. The Cowboys beat the Patriots by a wide margin at home. That's not a win that looks particularly impressive with the way the Patriots have played this season. So the strength of wins isn't there. And so you want to see more proven by the Cowboys. But this defense, I know it's diminished by the fact that you're not having Trayvon Diggs available. The defense, though, still, with Micah Parsons there. DeMarcus Lawrence is, of course, a name that has a lot of name recognition. Stephon Gilmore, I think, at corner. You also want to mention him as being an anchor in that defensive secondary. The Cowboys will be there in the mix in the NFC. They'll probably be in the mix in the division. I'd be surprised if they caught the Eagles, but I think they've done enough with the wins, with the overall record, to be in the top 10. Is a lot of it having to do with the schedule they played? Sure. Are they fortunate that I'm kind of excusing them for the fact that they lost by that much to the number 1 team in my top 10? Sure, I am excusing them, but at some point, the discrepancy between number 1 and number 10, whether you look at my list between San Fran and Dallas, 1 to 10, if you look at Luke's list, Miami to Cleveland, in either of those games, there's a big gap there, right? And so how much of a favorite would the 49ers be over the Cowboys if they played again? Probably over 10 points, right? And if the Dolphins played the Browns, could the Dolphins be an over 10-point favorite, even with Watson getting back from maybe an injury? They probably would be an over 10-point favorite. So there's a chasm there, right? And so the top 10, these are all above average teams, but certainly there's a lot of work to do for most of these teams to be in that top 4 to 5-ish range. Even number 5 for me, the Detroit Lions. Do we really view them in the same way that we view the power of Miami and the reliability of the 49ers typically, and of the Chiefs and of the Eagles typically? We don't quite associate them that way. So anyway, a lot to pick out here, maybe a lot to nitpick about these lists, but I think Luke and I did an all right job. We agree in large part. I do think that the Bengals, I have them at 9, double checking Luke's list, not seeing Cincinnati in his list. I'd be curious to see. I'm only looking at his top 10 right now, but I guess I'll catch up with Luke and see where he was thinking for Cincinnati in the overall top 32 as things stand in the NFL. But with that cap on the power rankings, let's take a look. We've hinted at it enough. This week's top picks, this week's best bets on the NFL slate in the coming week of pro football. And this is a bit of an interesting week to come for Luke's locks. And for my best bets, we'll begin with Luke's locks. Of course, I want to start off with our guy, Luke Sirenka. Here's what he likes this week for the betting slate. He has 4 favorites out of his 5 picks, only 1 underdog this week. And that's going to be, let's start off with his underdog to discuss that one. The Minnesota Vikings, 7.5 point underdogs. Luke has the Vikings covering this week as Minnesota will oppose the San Francisco 49ers in primetime on Monday Night Football. Interesting pick by Luke there. I stayed away from that one. I actually had the opposite with the 49ers being the favorite in that one. I have the 49ers covering their favorite as it's San Fran minus 7.5. A bit of a typo on our YouTube stream there, but 49ers minus 7.5 in their ball game against the Vikings. And I like the 49ers to cover because the Vikings being without Justin Jefferson, that worries me. Kirk Cousins in primetime, that worries me. The 49ers off a loss, that worries me. You're right, San Fran having something to prove off of an L. The 49ers are going to be that much more motivated, and I think they're going to actually find some separation against Minnesota. But I can see where the Vikings, another team that is going to be playing a little more with a lot of motivation on their own right, 2-4 record. If you fall 2-5, that spells bad news for your season for sure. The percentages on that aren't so good if you're a 2-5 team heading towards your postseason hopes. So I understand where Luke's coming from, but for me, I like the 49ers in that spot. I think San Fran can cover. Is it a lot to ask for a road team in the NFL in a standalone game to cover that kind of spread over a touchdown? Sure it is. But I also have the 49ers number 1 in my top 10, right? So I have to trust that the 49ers will find a way to, with the extra day off, and I say extra day off, I mean not playing on Sunday, instead playing on Monday. I'm expecting McCaffrey to be able to suit up for the 49ers. Under that premise, I do think CMC being with the Niners and maybe Justin Jefferson, of course, not being with Minnesota, that all leads up to me to make my pick. Or disagree with Luke, I'm going to take the 49ers as a favorite on Monday night. Now, I also am taking the Eagles minus 2.5 to cover against the Miami Dolphins in another primetime game. That one, of course, on Sunday night. And I hinted at it. The Eagles at home coming off a loss, all right? So we're talking about the 49ers with a disappointing loss. The Eagles also coming off a disappointing L. I really do believe this Eagles team, the veteran leadership, the older players, are going to bring things together and absolutely play on that much more fire against Miami at home. If it were Miami, maybe I'd have a different story. If the Eagles had to get on a plane and get all the way down there and make that defense travel against what is such a great offense, I got a lot of respect for it, of course. But the Eagles, I believe, will cover. It could easily be a field goal game, but at that number, minus 2.5, I like the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, Luke's pick of a favorite this week, of a high-profile favorite, it's the Kansas City Chiefs for Luke. Luke likes the KC Chiefs at minus 5.5, and that is a game that's going to be in the late afternoon window on CBS versus the LA Chargers. I like this pick. You can't trust the Chargers in a big game whatsoever. You can't trust LA in close games. It's not a fault of Justin Herbert, I don't think, although Herbert did have an interception late in the game on Monday that sealed that one. But I think that in the end, the Chiefs being at home, kind of surprised the number isn't more like 6.5, to be quite honest with you. So minus 5.5, I think that's a good pick for the Chiefs over the Chargers on Luke's end. And as we switch back to my end, my picks for my best bets, I continue with the Colts. I like the Indianapolis Colts plus 2.5. The Colts are playing this week, playing host to the Cleveland Browns. And so the Browns, they're coming off a high of a big win, right? We don't know if Deshaun Watson will play, even if Watson were to play. And I just don't know if I'm really that scared off by the pick. If he were to play, the Colts have Gardner Minshew at the controls as Anthony Richardson is going to have surgery and will be out for the duration of the season. It was reported today. That's obviously a big blow to the morale of this Colts team. But let's not forget, and Eagles fans listening will know, Gardner Minshew is more than capable, more than serviceable overall. I know he's coming off of not his best showing, but the Browns, I think, are in a spot where they could easily get trapped in the 1 o'clock window against Indianapolis. The Colts in the year are 3-3. How have they looked? Well, again, it's a team where, in reality, you have a couple of quality wins on your schedule. The Colts beat the Texans and win that looks better and better since C.J. Stroud's really been coming along. 31-20 win for the Colts over the Texans earlier this year. And the Colts were also able to knock off the Ravens in Baltimore by 3. So there's some moments here where you're seeing the Colts playing quality football. Now, they're coming off their own loss against Jacksonville most recently, 37-20. Don't love to see that, but the Jaguars, we think, should be the division favorite entering the year. So I'm not going to totally bag on the Colts for that, and I think the Colts can actually be one of the better underdog picks on our board this week. So I'm going to like Indianapolis here for my next best bet. Now, on Luke's end, we have a Luke's lock coming with Green Bay. The Packers, he and I agree on this one. I picked the Packers minus 1.5, and so did Luke. We're thinking along the same lines here. Green Bay this week, getting set to face the Denver Broncos. And at this point, the Broncos at 1-5 record this season. Pick against the Broncos if you have the opportunity to. I mean, you really do. Pick against the Broncos if you have the chance to. Russell Wilson, Sean Payton, it's not working. There's, you have to think there's a bit of a clash there, maybe personalities. And at a minimum, you know that even if you can't read too much into the personality thing, it's the way the Broncos are playing later in games. In the second half of games, the offense isn't the same as it is in the first half. Wilson's maybe moving the ball more in the first half than the second. And so if the game's going to be this close, a 1-point spread or so in favor of Green Bay, in a close game, not going to stick with the Broncos whatsoever, even if they're at Mile High. Go with the Packers. Go with Jordan Love to manage the game and get it done on the road. It's a pressure spot for the Broncos. I don't know if it's a pressure spot for the Packers. It's hard to gauge. Are the Packers, are they playoff expectations? Are they division favorites? Are they expected to catch the lines? Not sure. But the Broncos have all kinds of heat on them to get some respectability under their belt at some point. And so I don't know if I'm counting on them to do that, right? So I'm going to go with the Packers as Luke did. So we knock out 2 birds with 1 stone there. I'm going to go with the Packers as well, as Luke locked it in on his end. Packers minus 1.5 at Denver this weekend. Let's continue with Luke's locks. He likes the Bills to cover a big number. Buffalo is an 8.5-point favorite as the Bills take on the New England Patriots. And I can totally understand, again, Luke's perspective. This Patriots team is playing so poorly on offense. Mac Jones has been benched multiple times this season. You start to look at the point where, are we thinking about the next stage in the history of the Patriots that follows Bill Belichick? I mean, really, you're thinking about that by now, right? So I totally get the Bills being a pick here. It's a little wide for me for a divisional game, but the Patriots are so subpar. The Patriots are winless at home this season. You have to be not too worried about the Bills and how they're playing Foxborough from that perspective. But the Patriots, they don't inspire a lot of confidence, so I can see why Luke goes with this. But I stayed away from this game. I was tempted, but I stayed away from this game because in general, my philosophy is division games, they'll skew a bit closer than even they should. Or like even a big favorite, even a much better team, much better offense in Buffalo, the game could still skew closer than you would think with it being a divisional game. But again, a lot of reasons to like Luke's pick there. If you're a Bills guy or Patriots hater, you're going to be all over that one, minus 8.5. You're not going to be afraid of that number whatsoever. And to wrap up Luke's locks, before we finish up my best bets, Luke's locks include the last pick being Raiders minus 3.5. And that ball game sees Las Vegas playing against the Chicago Bears. Nice pick there by Luke. The Chicago Bears will be without Justin Fields. No timeline on him, on his injury. And so with the Bears not having Fields available due to his latest injury, which I want to make sure I correctly, it's dislocated thumb. I want to make sure I had that correct in our notes. Dislocated thumb for Fields, and that is carrying no timetable as first reported, at least on ESPN.com. Courtney Cronin had the story there. So the Raiders being the first team to get a chance at the Chicago Bears in the circumstances that the Bears currently live in. The Raiders, they have their own QB health that they've dealt with this season, but if the Raiders are able to just put together enough to build a lead and pull away from a Bears team that's going to be under-resourced on offense, I can see where the Raiders would get that number covered. I just don't really trust the Raiders in the big picture. It's not a team that I would typically go for as a favorite or a dog, but I totally can see where Luke was coming from here. And just want to make sure I touch up on a note from Luke as well. A team that we did not pick in any of our picks this week, the Bengals. Luke let me know that he did have the Bengals 11th, just outside his top 10. So really, again, Luke and I in sync. We're not that far off on our top NFL rankings, but just wanted to provide that note in as I received it from Luke in his production tonight. Wrapping up towards the end of the show, but I have to finish up my best bets as well. I had the Packers overlapping with Luke's pick, so we agreed on that one. And my final pick to share, the Jaguars, plus 1.5 points. I like the Jaguars this Thursday Night Football. We'll see the Jaguars play the New Orleans Saints, and I'm a big fan of the Jaguars in this spot. Yes, Trevor Lawrence is listed as questionable. Does it seem to me like he's going to play? It's certainly feeling that way. Not that I have the inside scoop on this one in particular, but Trevor Lawrence, without making too many vast assumptions, it seems like Lawrence is going to be available. There could be a setback or there could be an unexpected change, but it looks like there are some reasons to be optimistic that Lawrence will give it a go against the Saints. And the Jaguars, I've been a believer in entering the season, so I want to stand by them in this spot. Now, the Jaguars did fall to the Texans in a game that you really would have liked to see the Jaguars get done in a divisional game, but that's their only loss aside from a loss to the Chiefs. So the Jaguars beyond that, riding 3 straight wins, including a win over the Bills over the pond. Yes, the Jags are very comfortable there. Yes, they're used to playing in that situation. That was part of the reason I picked the Jaguars over on WVUD's live talk show. I picked the Jaguars a little ways back to beat the Bills as a super dog, one of my underdog picks that week. But that being said, victory lap over there. I'm going to go back to the Jaguars as well as an underdog. I do think the Jaguars, shout out to Doug EP as always, the Jaguars will have a chance to get into New Orleans and compete and keep that one plenty close. ESPN's analytics actually agree with me as well. Not that this is a crazy bold pick, but just to share what ESPN's analytics have to say, 57% win probability is the expectation for the Jaguars in this one. So Jaguars, we'll see if they can live up to that one. And we'll look at the Saints injury report. It's got a few names on it as well. So it's the game you're curious to see. on Thursday night. It's a shorter week, of course, for both teams. Curious to see how it stacks up in terms of who is available. But when you look at the Saints, just some notable names you're not necessarily going to see. Tyrann Mathieu questionable with a foot injury. Demario Davis, a linebacker, questionable. That's when he was listed as questionable earlier this week. Just even today, it was Demario Davis listed as questionable. And so the list goes on. I mean, and it's everybody in the league at some point has all these guys banged up in mid-October. But accounting for that, I just think the Jaguars, at the end of the day, I'm going to go with them as an underdog that you can be healthy picking the Jaguars in this one. But phew, that's a look at the best bets. Just to recap, I like the Jags and the Colts and that's it. The Jags, Colts, and that's a pair of underdogs that I like this week. I was looking at the 49ers there on our screen, but the 49ers are a favorite this week. And so that's not one of my underdogs. My three favorites I'm taking include the 49ers and the Eagles and the Packers. Over for Luke's locks, Luke likes the Raiders, the Bills, the Packers, and the Chiefs as favorites. And his one underdog for this week, watch out, Luke says, for the Minnesota Vikings. So that's Luke's pick this week. The Vikings will, again, face the San Francisco 49ers. My NFL top 10 number one team, the 49ers and the Vikings, will play on Monday night, October the 23rd. With that, though, that caps off the NFL Week 7 preview, and it has been a real doozy. I mean, goodness gracious, the slate, it continues to be entertaining. Love two of the games on Sunday featuring local teams if you're on the East Coast, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Baltimore Ravens playing against quality competition, and you can watch both games. You can see the Ravens in the early afternoon window and the Eagles on Sunday Night Football on NBC. As it should be, a great Sunday of NFL coming up. And even as you take a peek, we wrap up our show, you look at the bottom scroll if you're watching on YouTube, college football this weekend on tap. Really, really interested in some of the games in the college level this weekend in the FBS realm. You're seeing those all on the bottom scroll. And to touch on the NHL as well, NHL scroll appearing as well. Some notable games for the Flyers upcoming, Edmonton Oilers, the Philadelphia Flyers, Edmonton, one of the best rosters in the sport, and the Flyers, of course, not as many high hopes for the Flyers once again this season. And so we'll see if the Flyers can give us reasons to talk about them here on Uncaged Sports Talk going forward. But tonight, it's been my pleasure to guest host for Luke Steranka. Again, Luke in Red October, he's absolutely unleashing his voice with the rowdy fans at the bank, and we love to see it for Luke. And we love to see him producing tonight's broadcast, or I should say the show tonight for Uncaged Sports Talk. Luke helped me out with a great deal here this evening, helped me get it set up, and really inviting me. I appreciate him having me tonight. And it's just been a great fun time talking sports with all of you. It's been a pleasure to see Luke as well again. Hoping to be a guest in the near future before too long. Hopefully have a lot to talk about with the Phillies continuing their postseason run. And with that, just want to cap it all off by saying have a great day or great evening, wherever and however you may be listening. Take care. Enjoy Red October responsibly and safely. And have a happy Halloween from me if I don't talk to you before then, listeners. And I'll catch you on the other side. This has been episode 12 of Uncaged Sports Talk, and Luke will catch you next time out.